It is July 3rd, 2013 at 1:55 p.m. I'm sitting with Shannan Koucherik, and we're going to conduct another interview for the Oral History Project. All right, Ms. Koucherik, if you don't mind just starting a little bit with your background, maybe where you were born, and how you got to
I was born in Manhattan, New York.
Manhattan, New York.
In 1951.
Okay.
And raised in Westchester and Dutchess counties in New York, which is just above New York City. My mother. Okay. Yeah. My mother came here in 1945 with the first British delegation to the United Nations.
Wow.
And my father's family goes back to the 1500s in the United States, and Plymouth particularly in the 1600s. We moved to Texas my senior year of high school, and I graduated from Hereford High School, which is in the Panhandle. And then kind of roamed about trying to find myself until came to the Valley in 1974 with my then husband and son, and we lived in Hayden. He was recruited up here by Energy Fuels to run equipment.
Oh, okay.
And he was a heavy equipment operator.
In Hayden?
Yeah, Energy Fuels was south of Hayden.
Okay.
So we're kind of where 20 Mile is now.
Okay.
Same area.
Right.
And we've been in the valley. I've been in the valley, except for a 10-year absence between 85 or 84 and 94, when I was living in California and Vernal, Utah.
Okay. What part of California, if you don't mind me asking?
The first time I was out there I was living in Trona, which is right one hill over from Death Valley.
Oh.
And then the second time, which was 1990, I was living in Los Angeles County, serving as a missionary to the inner city.
Okay.
And I came back here in 1994.
Okay.
And have been here ever since.
Okay.
My longest running occupation has been dog training. I actually started training dogs when I was 6.
Okay.
In New York.
Any specific breeds?
No.
Just dogs.
And did a lot of obedience competition, had some top-rated, nationally rated dogs, and showed in conformation, showed dogs for other people, did a little bit of judging, really got into search and rescue in the late 70s, 1970s, and I actually had the first search and rescue dog in northwest Colorado.
Okay.
And that was a border collie, and he was credited with quite a few finds, including a convicted murderer that we found down in Eagle.
Wow. Do you by chance remember that person's name?
The person?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. That's just wondering.
Nope. It was just another guy running.
Yeah. So were you working as a team with the dog?
Yes. When you're working with tracking, you're on a line, 50-foot line, and you let the dog work, and it's a matter of being able to read the dog and knowing that the dog really knows what it's doing. And it was during the earlier years of tracking training, and there weren't that many. Now it's, they're pretty numerous now. But Tim was the first.
Tim.
The first one, yeah.
What was the dog's name?
Tim. And I also used him. I was a reserve officer with the Hayden Police Department, and so I trained him to be my patrol dog. And even though he was only 35 pounds, he was trained to the sleeve, and he would take people. And but mostly he did search and rescue, and we did a lot of responsible pet ownership education with children and things like that, and that's something that's carried on over the years. I've in the 80s, 85, I had decided that you could only, I had moved to Vernal, and I decided that you could only have so many blue ribbons and trophies, and they really didn't mean that much. And I was really intrigued by service dog training, and I had an opportunity to start raising puppies for guide dogs for the blind. So I got connected with them, and I ended up raising 7 German Shepherds for guide dogs for the blind, and just became hooked on service dog training because it meant something. It changed people's lives. And then when I came back to Craig, I came back to the Yampa Valley in 94, and then I moved to Craig in 95. I was working for the Craig Daily Press, and I learned the newspaper business literally from the floor up, and was eventually made an editor. Did feature stories, did a lot of historical writing, and then the paper was sold, and I went on my way.
Right.
I still write for the museum, and I write newsletters and things like that. But that was a real heyday for me in the mid-90s of writing and editing.
What did that look like here in Craig? The paper and its involvement?
Well, back then, it was the Craig Daily Press was owned by Howard Publications, and most of the people who worked there were what we would term locals, and they wanted to be here, and they wanted to stay here. And we had a rule for a good part of the time I was there that we did not use any wire filler. So we wrote the entire paper every day. We also did a weekly that I ended up being in charge of, was called the Saturday Northwest. And we referred to that as a coffee table newspaper because it was primarily feature stories. It was the kind of paper you could pick up and read something and then put it down and come back to it. And that was really the most fun for me because I could write until I was done. And I got to meet a lot of outstanding people. I did a lot of biographies of people who would not normally have their stories told because they were just working Joes.
Right.
I tried to avoid people who got a lot of publicity. And the paper was even though Howard owned it, and Howard is a big chain of newspapers, they had that autonomy to say, you let the Craig Daily Press be Craig's paper. And that unfortunately was lost in 97 when it was sold.
Was there a reason for that? Or do you know what the reason was?
Why it was sold? Yeah, Howard just wanted to pull out. They were pulling back from some of their smaller papers. I think they owned about 120 papers at the time. And we had a choice, editorial staff, we could go to any Howard paper in the country, or we could say goodbye. We could stay. And I stayed, but I only lasted 8 days with the new company. It just was not a good fit. And so that was the biggest difference, I think, is that we had people who understood the community, who were really part of the community, and weren't just trying to make it a line on their resume.
Right.
and it does make the flavor of the paper different.
Right.
So that was a good period in my life. I wish it had lasted longer, but that's okay. And then through the end of the 90s, I kind of bounced from job to job, worked at the Hayden Airport as an operations officer, Unicom operator, and was doing freelance writing on the side. And met my husband in September of 2001, and we were married in June of 2002, and we began promoting service dog training and primarily helping people train their own dogs because it's so much cheaper, and most people can train their own dogs if given the right structure.
Right.
And many of the people who need a service dog can't afford it. So that was our goal. We built our current boarding kennel with the thought that it would help financially, help the service dog part keep going. And it kind of backfired on us. The kennel became so popular and so successful that we didn't have time
to do the
for
training.
Service dogs. Yeah, so we had to let one go, and the kennel still is booming. It's 7 years old now, and
wow.
It's just booming. Especially this morning. It's booming. But my life has changed. Well, our lives have changed in the last 6 months because I can no longer work the dogs in the kennel. And so we're kind of at a crossroads of, what do we do now? But I'm very involved in the community. I'm a Salvation Army Surface Exchange Officer, which means I make the decisions on who gets financial aid from the Salvation Army here in Moffat County. And I'm also the organizing regent of the Augusta-Wallahan chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Organized it 5 years ago.
You organized it?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this year I was elected the Colorado State chaplain for the DAR. So I'm no longer the regent, I'm the vice regent. It's the same thing. But I am a state DAR officer now. And our chapter started out with 15 members, and now we have 25. So that's a pretty good increase for 5 years. And we are the first chapter in Colorado to own property.
Okay.
We bought the Lay Schoolhouse 3 years ago in 2010, and we are in the process of restoring it into an interpretive center for the history of Northwest Colorado. We just in March got it on the National Register of Historic Places. It's also on the Colorado State Register of Historic Places and the Colorado Register of Historic Schools. So that's a pretty big accomplishment for such a new small group to do that.
Right.
So
affecting a lot of change in the community as well.
We try.
Yeah.
The DAR motto is God, Home, and Country, and it's preserving the past, enhancing the present, and something the future, promoting the future, ensuring the future, or something like that. I don't quite remember that right now. And we take that very seriously. We do. We commemorate Constitution Week. We do Flag Day. We usually distribute hundreds of flags on Flag Day all around town. We have had essay contests in the schools. We do programs with kids on various patriotic topics. And so that's a very big part of our activities now. So we'll be building a float tonight.
For the parade tomorrow?
For the parade tomorrow.
July 4th? Wow, okay. So you've been very involved in the community.
Yes.
I mean, understandably so from all your experiences. Aside from your involvement, how have you seen the general community of Craig develop? Especially, how had it changed in that 10-year period where you were gone?
Well, it had grown.
It had grown.
Some landmarks had moved or disappeared, obviously, and
do you have any examples, maybe?
The Luttrell barn had been moved while I was gone, and we actually were married in the Luttrell barn in 2002. I think generally the attitude of people has changed. When I came here in '74, my then husband was black, and we really had a rough time. I don't think the valley was really ready yet, and I've had people deny that, but that's the way it was. And we would be spit on and refuse service in restaurants.
And what year was this?
74. And at that point, there were more KKK members in Colorado than any other state in the Union. And there were a lot of people who would be friends to our faces, and then they'd badmouth us behind our backs. And it was so unusual to see another black person then in the 70s here.
Right.
Sometimes they would come in to work on the power plant for a few weeks, and but we very seldom saw people of color. Children would walk up to my husband and touch him to see if the color would come off. It was an interesting way to see prejudice and ignorance. And now, of course, we have quite a few blacks and a lot of interracial couples. And I always chuckle when sometimes you see a young woman and she's with a white woman and she's with a black man, and sometimes they're actually strutting, like, look at me, look what I'm doing, and I always just smile and shake my head.
Right.
And go, girlie, you should have been here in the 70s.
Right.
Because you didn't strut then. We didn't hide by any means.
Right.
But you sure didn't make a show of yourself, and you didn't. You just were, and we never even thought that while we're an interracial couple, we were just married.
Right.
My son had trouble in school, and it just it's the way it was. We were illegal to be married in 7 states at that time, in the 70s. So.
Did that change at all while you were here? Did that perception of your relationship change? Did you see the community change?
Well, he was gone by the time I came back. So, but I know, like, one of my dear friends recently married, like last year, into an interracial marriage. And he's a businessman. And we've talked about it, and we talked before, because he knows my background. We've been friends for many, many years, and what I could say to him was, I hope the community treats you kindly. And certainly I would say most of the people are okay. There's always going to be that element of bigotry,
of course,
and it runs both ways. But my friend has lost some customers, and things because he chose to marry this beautiful woman, and but he keeps on going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
And that was recent, you said.
last year. Yeah. So it's still, it is what it is. It's Northwest Colorado. It's a conservative. My husband and I are conservative politically. I more than my husband. And we kind of accept it to a point. I'll stop anything if I hear somebody bad-mouthing, or I'll stop them dead in their tracks, whether it's somebody I know or not. It's just not appropriate, and I won't accept it. I was raised colorblind, and my parents had friends who were interracial couples, and I never knew they had a label.
Right.
It never occurred to me. I just knew they all had beautiful children. And that's probably one of the biggest changes. And the economy, of course, here, because it is a boom and bust, it's up and down and up and down. And we've learned as business owners that government isn't always on our side.
Okay.
So, but we can sure understand struggling businesses. We're very fortunate that our business has never struggled. It's just been on a very steep upward trend. But we can understand what it would be like if we weren't.
Right.
So.
Okay. Is there anything else, just in general, you'd like to add about the community?
I still think it's a great community. I really do. I wouldn't stay here if I didn't think it was worth putting my life into.
Right.
I think most of the people are genuine. We can agree to disagree sometimes, which is good. I like to see that there's a overall patriotism here. And I think it's a really good, solid town, and I've had the opportunity of going back and studying the area before Craig was even a camp, and see how it has grown. And of course it was a company town. It was an investment town, basically, when it started. And so I've been able to literally have read all the old newspapers from the time the Pentagraph was first published in 1893 on the sidewalk.
Wow.
And, so I've been able to read those papers and write about a lot of the events and a lot of the people. And to see how it's changed, mostly for the good. There were obviously some bad things, but every town does.
Right.
Has things like that, and I take that as a privilege that I've had that opportunity, which most people don't get a chance to do that.
Right.
I can look at archives that a lot of people don't have access to, and get a better understanding of where we've come from. I think it's critical to know where we've come from, so we can know where we're going.
Right.
Because it gives you that foundation to build on, and if you see a crack, you can fix it before it gets too far gone.
Right.
So I think that's probably one of the main reasons I stay here. We like the small town community. We like the support system. This morning, before we even got home from being evacuated, it was already on Facebook that there'd been an explosion, and people were calling and emailing and saying, "Are you okay?" And some came by, "Are you okay? We wanted to make sure you and the dogs are all okay."
Right. And what was the business that happened?
It was Herod Trucking.
Okay.
Which is in a shop directly across the street from us.
Okay.
And the shop belongs to a friend of ours. And they had an explosion in the shop, and it jarred our buildings and us, and
Right.
they heard it all the way down to Lally Simpson, so it was a very big explosion. And then we were evacuated very quickly.
Right.
But just, you know, that kind of contact. We've thought about, you know, with this health issue now, we've thought, well, maybe we need to go somewhere warmer or somewhere, you know. And we're not willing to give up the community that we have here. It's worth it to stay, you know.
Right.
So it's a big thing to have a community. A lot of people don't ever get to feel that. But you have to put in to get it out.
Right.
If you just sit in your living room and watch television and never take part in community things and try to help the community, you're never going to be part of the community. You're just going to live here. There's a difference between living here and being part of it.
Right.
So.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think that's it.